We will present something that has to do with interoperability, traceability. And I'm pleased to announce Bill. Bill and I go way back, and Bill will talk about technology as a tool, again, in a system. Bill, the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Rudy. I sound like the voice of God. That's so refreshing. Yeah, the topic of what can technology do to enable you to get better information and ensure compliance throughout your extended supply chain. And we'll approach this from the point of view that there is no single technology solution that will do that for you. If anyone tells you they can, they're lying, or they don't understand the problem. So as a small company, our GSQA, Global Supplier Quality Assurance Platform, is used by some of the companies in this room to connect and collaborate with their extended supply chain. But that in itself is not enough. There's other types of information that's required, there's other types of services that are required, and for that we are proud to have partnerships with the organizations on the screen. We'll talk about that, how that works, but there are many other types of resources that you may need. And one of the things that I've learned in the last 2 days from sitting in on the presentations is that if I had the opportunity, I would throw out all these slides and start all over again, because there's so many other facets to the problem and the challenge that I never understood. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been a real eye-opener for me. So the extended supply chain, graphically defined and boringly recited in thousands and thousands of presentations, is a reality for most organizations in consumer products and food particularly, and other applications as well. The issue is that you may know who your first tier is, you may know a little bit about the second tier, but as you move back, you get less and less visibility. And the problem from a forced labor perspective is that the abuses are most likely to occur at the end of the back end of the chain. That origin point, whether it's a farm or a fishery or a mine, that's where the really bad stuff happens. So the problem for companies that have been existing in this world for some time is that now there's a greater awareness of the problem. Consumers, investors, regulators are much more likely to pick up their phone or their device of choice, whatever that might be, and ask the question, have forced labor indicators been checked in the supply chain for this product? In this case, spinach ravioli. It's delicious. But again, the heart of the issue is that far end of the supply chain is where we need to be focused. So one way to do that is to, of course, partner with reliable sources of information. Maplecroft already got a plug from Kellogg's this morning, so I'll repeat her endorsement. But as you see on their page for forced labor, they cite the sources that they're using to gather information. Many of these are public, many of these are freely available. What they do is compile that, analyze that, provide rankings and ratings, statistical analysis tools that you can use to start to determine where are the vulnerabilities in my supply chain. Because global factors and global maps are wonderful, but they don't do you a damn bit of good when you're trying to make decisions about where are we going to source these items from and how are we going to deal with it. Maplecroft gives you all kinds of fancy graphics and dashboards. Again, it's just a tool for you to help identify where the problems are and then get some basic information about ratings and rankings for your supply chain that you need to put somewhere. And that's where a platform like GSQA comes into place. SAP, Oracle, many other vendors have similar capabilities. The key is for us that we want to track it and we want to link this to the GS1 standard codes for materials and locations, because that, as you will see a little bit later on, is the fundamental way to exchange data. And Kathleen from Walmart yesterday was talking about the challenge of being able to share data. And if you don't have a common language, a common set of identifiers for the information and the records that you're working with, you will not be able to do that. So we've heavily embraced the GS1 standards and the capabilities associated with that. And then in addition to the basic information about the material itself, you may also then be able to compile query answers, results for the things that you care about and your consumers care about, and build that into the database as well. And if you keep on going down the screen there, you see we start to have a listing of ingredients that go into the spinach ravioli. That's the first tier in the supply chain. Each of those ingredients, the cooked ravioli, the sauce, etc., would have their own list of ingredients. And now you start to build that multi-tier supply chain effectively and intelligently for your business, and that's the heart of it. Once you have those data elements compiled, you can start to produce colorful maps, which everyone loves. The value here is that you can present this to management and say, we're focused on the yellow dots on this map, and that's where we want to put our audit resources. Because of course, as Antoine said, it's not a case of doing away with audits, it's using the resources more effectively. So let's start with the high-risk locations, let's get those things nailed down, and then move on to the less vulnerable points in the supply chain. Part of that process involves not just gathering information, which systems like ours do very nicely in an automated manner, but more importantly, being able to verify and establish that the information you have is correct, that it was entered properly, there were no translation issues, that the documents that you asked for from a supplier or sub-supplier are indeed valid and reliable. Blockchain. But we believe that that has to be done by human beings. And as an organization, you probably don't have those resources sitting around waiting to jump on the phones and the emails. SIM is a vendor in the Netherlands that provides these services for many of the global retailers and has a methodology for contacting suppliers. You may be a small sub-tier of your suppliers. You're not going to do 10,000 on day one. But then going through a process, an iterative process to get the information and establish it, maybe at the end of that process you've got 2 or 3 suppliers out there who are not responding and who are not interested in participating, and you need to make some decisions about them. But having that kind of ongoing verification then gives you the confidence that the data you've collected is something you can actually use and make decisions and take action with. So again, our curious consumer wants to know, were the forced labor indicators checked in that supply chain? How are they going to find that out? Well, this is where we believe strongly in what the Consumer Goods Forum has done in recent years. Rudy is far too modest to talk about it, but we think that the Open API is a potential global standard that will solve a huge number of problems, because each one of those tiers, each one of those companies in those tiers has their own systems. Even if they all have SAP, they've all modified them and customized them so heavily that they can't even talk internally, much less to anybody else. So the CGF Open API is a way for that consumer to ask a query of their primary supplier, their primary vendor for the ravioli. And if that vendor doesn't have the information, they can pass it on automatically to their supply chain. And that's where that mapping of the supply chain becomes so important, because you have to have that infrastructure in place and established in order to pass these queries effectively through the system. So what's it look like for the consumer? They have the box, they have a question. They scan the QR code, they go to a smart label or other type of website that gives them access to real information about what's in that box. They see an interface. This is the open standard interface that CGF has created. You can see we're using the GS1 codes. We're using the query capability to ask, were forced labor indicators checked for the supply chain for this box? We've developed our own version of this. Again, it's using the GS1 code. You see at the bottom there that we're asking the question, and again tying it to the coded query, so we have interoperability across systems. Anybody we talk to will hopefully know what 289.76 means, and will be able to give us the right answer or no answer. So once we have that question in place, the consumer or the regulator or the investor can get that answer instantaneously in a matter of seconds to that query. Now obviously a simple yes may not be good enough for you. You want to say, okay, what's the documentation associated with it? How was that verified? Oh, well, that's the data that SIM can provide in terms of who made the calls, who made the checks, what did they record. So there's a whole host of pieces that have to come together here. But it is entirely possible, it's real, it's available today. You need to decide what information you need and what products, commodities you have to care about. And that will drive your decision as to how to work and how to approach this. And Britta's presentation will be fascinating to see how Metro pulled it all together and made it all work gloriously on day one, I'm sure. So I appreciate the time, and I'll look forward to the questions.
Before you run off, one short question again. You just touched it, but how do you think that this kind of tool or technology can support, interrelate with audits? What's your point of view there?
Well, the key there is that any organization has limited resources from an audit perspective, even if they're trying to outsource that. You can only write so big a check to the auditing firm. So you have to have an intelligent methodology to determine where do I want to start? Who are the people that we need to audit first? What are the questions we have to ask? Can we utilize a service like Ulula's to get some of that voice of the worker directly, so the auditor doesn't have to go around asking those questions. He's got a whole set of answers already, and he can sit down with the plant manager and say, you know, 20% of your workers said that you guys are not handling this well. What do you think about that? And that's a much more productive use of the auditor's time, and I would suspect they would enjoy that a lot more than just going around and filling out questionnaires and spreadsheets.
Okay. Thank you. Any urgent question to Bill before he joins me at the panel? There's one over there. Thank you. Yes. The microphone is coming. Yes. Thank you so much.
I was almost out, and they pulled me back in. I can hear you.
All right. So the question I had about the data transparency in the GS1 is how are the attributes being defined, say, for disclosure of non-financial information in the different attributes? I know my organization, we work with the Smart Label Initiative. There was a lot of time up front putting definitional criteria around these various attributes. Because without that, we can create a very wide funnel of questions. So I'm curious, insofar as the thinking on that dimension of this initiative.
Well, I'll give you my understanding based on extensive year-and-a-half experience. Rudy has far more depth on that, and we'll probably be able to do a better job. But my understanding is in that query database, so to speak, organizations that are signed in as part of the GS1 program have the authority and the tools to create their own queries and add them to the database. So that if you go in and you say, I want to ask questions about forced labor, that question indicators check might already be there, and you can use that. Or you might say, we have an additional question that we want to ask, so you would have the authority and the capability to add to that database and establish that as a standard query that would be available to people. Rudy, is that right?
That's fully correct. That's the current approach that we have.
So there's no kind of...
It will naturally...
question? That's what I was hoping for.
Yes, basically, the questions...
Provide information. It's just easier to get on. Same question for multiple partners.
True. There are questions that you will make public, and there might be questions that you might not want to make public. So we can only talk about those that a company might want to make public. And if they share it, this is something we can standardize. And that's our current approach. There's a strong belief that there will be kind of self-regulation in the industry and among companies saying, these are our questions. Couldn't we align? And that's the way forward. What we are not doing is fixing it from the beginning into cement and then, really inhibit some creativity and frame it too fast. Okay? Does that answer your question? Excellent. Thank you. Bill, thank you so much. Now, please join me on the panel. Thank you.